What's gaming, gamers? Today, I'm going to show you how to become immortal in almost any content in Destiny using only an exotic helmet and a little bit of solar light. To start, the exotic helmet I'll be using is Loreley Splendor. Loreley Splendor is a helmet with the exotic perk Cauterizing Flame. Cauterizing Flame makes sunspots give you the restoration buff. Restoration is a Solar 3.0 keyword, and it regenerates your health and shields over time. The healing from restoration can't be stopped by damage, and it will continuously heal you at a constant rate until the timer ends, even if you're frozen by stasis. Cauterizing Flame's biggest perk is that casting your Titan barricade will summon a sunspot at your feet, automatically giving you the restoration buff. Additionally, if your barricade is fully charged, becoming critically wounded will automatically spawn a sunspot where you stand without you having to summon a barricade yourself. This will give you the restoration buff and heal you over time, allowing you to continue dealing damage with the safety of constantly regenerating health. Now we'll talk about the subclass. For your super, use Hammer of Soul. Burning Maul is good in its own right, as its heavy attack can stunlock bosses, and with Roaring Flames ×3 it does do good damage if you're just spamming light attacks. Burning Maul's cooldown is also around 20% shorter, so you'll get more supers and can clean up majors and bosses with the super more often. Unfortunately, if those majors or bosses fly or move around a lot, Burning Maul won't be able to be used to its max potential, and in the worst case scenarios, it won't be able to be used at all. For that reason, and a couple more I'll explain later in the video, Hammer of Soul is better for the build. Moving on to abilities, for the barricade, run the Rally Barricade. You may be thinking that Towering Barricade would be better, as it's a defensive barricade and would make you effectively impervious to damage while you're standing behind it, and you wouldn't necessarily be wrong in thinking that. However, Rally Barricade has a shorter base cooldown, and that's simply more important. If you remember, Loreley Splendor will only spawn a sunspot at your feet when critically wounded if your barricade is off cooldown. If it's recharging, Loreley's can't do what it's supposed to do, and you won't get the healing from the sunspot, leaving you critically wounded and without restoration. Rally Barricade also gives your weapons increased reload speed, stability, and range when standing behind it, so you can cast it yourself and use those buffs to good effect if you choose to. Again, Loreley's also spawns a sunspot if you cast your barricade yourself, so you can use it aggressively, getting the sunspot to heal you while the barricade itself gives you all those weapon buffs. To continue the trek towards invincibility, run the Throwing Hammer melee. If your throwing hammer strikes a target, whether it kills them or not, picking the hammer up off the floor grants you Cure, and Cure heals you instantly for around 30% of your total health. The hammer strike melee doesn't give any healing buffs, instead simply scorching and igniting enemies, so it won't help you in your quest for immortality. Lastly, for abilities, run the Healing Grenade. The Healing Grenade grants Cure on impact, again healing you for around 30% of your health. It also drops an orb, and when this orb is picked up, you get Restoration. This is helpful if you're taking a lot of damage and have no immediate access to cover, aren't in range to throw a hammer at an enemy to get Cure, or your barricade is on cooldown. You could run any one of the damaging grenades, but as this is a pure immortality build, the Healing Grenade is the best option for furthering that goal. For the subclass's aspects, firstly, run Soul Invictus. Soul Invictus makes sunspots even better, as when standing in one, your super energy drains slower and your abilities recharge faster. This is what makes the Hammer of Soul super so good for this build. Soul Invictus also makes Hammer of Soul impacts summon sunspots, letting you use the super for longer. On top of all of this, sunspots damage and scorch any enemy that walks in one, leaving you less vulnerable to being mobbed by melee enemies such as Thrall or Warbeasts. The second aspect we're running is Roaring Flames. Roaring Flames makes your solar abilities deal more damage if they or any ignitions have gotten kills. Your super can also be buffed by Roaring Flames, giving it increased damage as well. Roaring Flames lasts for 20 seconds, and any kill by a solar ability before the timer ends will increase this timer back to 20 seconds, allowing for the chaining of Roaring Flames between encounters if you're smart with saving an ad and fast moving between encounters. Roaring Flames won't give you any healing abilities on its own, but because your throwing hammers will be dealing more damage, they have a better chance of getting a kill in late game content, and that increases the amount of sunspots you'll have on the ground to heal you. The fragments for this build will help you maintain your restoration and radiant effects, as well as getting your barricade back faster. The first fragment is Ember of Empyrean. Any solar weapon or ability final blow, while you currently have a stack of radiant or restoration, will increase the duration of those effects. This will be crucial to staying alive while waiting for your rally barricade, as the restoration buff's duration can be lengthened while the barricade is on cooldown. The second fragment is Ember of Torches. This is how you'll become radiant. When you're radiant, any solar weapons that you have equipped will deal 25% increased damage. Ember of Torches has a really strong positive feedback loop with Ember of Empyrean as well. Ember of Torches makes you radiant, which means you deal increased damage with solar weapons. Getting a kill with a solar weapon or ability procs Ember of Empyrean, which lengthens the duration of your radiant buff. As long as you're killing enemies, this can loop indefinitely. Your third fragment will be Ember of Singeing. This makes your class ability recharge faster when you scorch targets, and on a Titan, your class ability is your barricade, which is what you need to let Loreley Splendor heal you when you go critical. As long as you're scorching targets, your barricade will cool down incredibly fast, especially if you're also standing in a sunspot and getting the cooldown speed increase from that. The last fragment is Ember of Solace. This will make Radiant and Restoration effects simply last longer, allowing you more time to get the Empyrean Torches loop going, as well as giving you Restoration for longer, meaning you can afford to have your barricade cooldown be a little bit longer if there aren't a lot of ads around to get quick kills on. Now that I've explained the subclass, it's on to the Armor build. The Armor build is a protective light build centered around spawning elemental wells with a throwing hammer melee. For stats, I recommend speccing firstly into Resilience. The 40% damage resistance at tier 10 Resilience is absurdly strong in all content, as well as Resilience being the Titan class stat, meaning the higher Resilience you have, the faster your barricade will recharge. For a secondary stat, you can choose between Recovery and Discipline. I've chosen Discipline as getting the healing grenades back faster lets you make mistakes and not get punished as hard for them. For armor affinities, we're using a Solar Helmet, Void Arms, a Solar Chest Piece, Solar Legs, and an Arc Titan Mark. For mods, I'll start on the helmet. In the Elemental Well slot, put in a Bountiful Wells mod. This will allow you to spawn 2 Elemental Wells instead of 1 later on. In the helmet specific slots, run a Kinetic Siphon mod and a Harmonic Siphon mod. These will spawn Orbs of Power, which you'll use to get both your super back faster and your grenade back faster later on. On your Void Arms, in the combat style slot, run Protective Light. This is a really strong mod that gives you 50% damage reduction when critically wounded, if you have any stacks of Charge with Light. The amount of stacks of Charge with Light you have affect the duration of Protective Light, not its overall damage reduction. At 1 stack, you get 6 seconds of damage reduction, and at 2 stacks, you get 10 seconds. By default, you can only have 2 stacks of Charge with Light, but you can get more using other mods. I'll talk about these shortly. Using Bountiful Wells from our helmet will be consistently charged with light, so you'll always have the damage reduction when you need it most. In the armed specific slots, run 2 Focusing Strike mods. These will give you class ability energy whenever dealing damage with your melee ability, and you'll be throwing your hammer a lot, so this will get your barricade back a lot quicker. On the Solar Chest Piece, the most important mod is Supercharged in the combat style slot. This allows you to get 2 more stacks of Charge with Light up to a maximum of 4. At 3 stacks of Charge with Light, Protective Light's 50% damage reduction will last for 13 seconds, and at your maximum of 4 stacks, Protective Light will last for 16 seconds. For the chest specific mod slots, run whatever seasonal resistance mod is up for the season you're currently in. I'm in Season of the Seraph, and Energy Diffusion Substrate is the current resistance mod. Alternatively, you can run one of the other resist mods, but the seasonal mods are generally the best bet as they encompass more than one type of damage. On your Solar Legs, run Elemental Charge. This is the mod that will get you Charged with Light when picking up Elemental Wells, which lets you use Protective Light and get the damage resistance from that. The reason your legs need to be solar is because you should run double Innervation mods in your leg-specific slots. This will give you energy towards your grenade when you pick up an Orb of Power. With the Harmonic and Kinetic Siphon mods on your helmet, you'll be getting orbs quite frequently, and these will help with your healing grenades uptime. Alternatively, you could run 1 Innervation and 1 Recuperation mod, which will just give you health when you pick up an Orb of Power, but it's up to you. I prefer the extra grenade energy, thus I use double Innervation. Lastly, for armor, on your Arc Mark, in the combat style slot, run Melee Wellmaker. This plays into the fact that you'll be throwing your hammer at everything that moves, and will spawn elemental wells every time your hammer gets a kill. For the class item specific mods, run an Outreach mod. This will help you immensely if you can't find or pick up your hammer before it disappears, as your barricade is really fast to cool down, and you get melee energy whenever you cast it yourself. One thing to be aware of though, when Loreley Splendor casts your barricade for you, it doesn't proc Outreach. You have to cast your barricade manually for it to give you melee energy. In the other class item specific slot, you have a choice to make. You can either run a 1-2 finisher mod, or you can not run it. What it does is fully refill your melee ability when you get a finisher. The trade-off is that it takes 1/6 of your supercharge to do it. Seeing as though the throwing hammer is effectively the center of the entire build, this is an incredibly strong mod, but if you're a fan of spamming your super, it may not be the right choice for you. I run both Outreach and 1-2 finisher, but you really don't need both of them, and can instead choose one and use the other slot for a seasonal mod of your choosing. Now that I've explained to you what the build will look like, I want to go over your weapon choices really quickly. Firstly, because you're running Harmonic Siphon on your helmet, you're going to want a solar weapon in your energy slot. Because we're on the solar subclass, I also recommend having Incandescent on whichever solar weapon you decide to equip. Incandescent creates a scorching explosion whenever you kill an enemy, scorching any enemies who are nearby the enemy you've killed. It's the best perk on solar weapons when you're running the solar subclass, and with this build, Incandescent will proc Ember of Singeing to get your barricade back faster. As far as which specific weapon to run, if you need a little bit of guidance, some recommendations are the Calus Mini Tool SMG and the Drang Sidearm from the Crown of Sorrow, the Zowli's Bane Hand Cannon from the Kingsfall raid, and the Strident Whistle Bow, which is a drop from the Vanguard weapon pool. All of those weapons can roll Incandescent, and all but Strident Whistle are craftable, letting you put whatever perks you want on them. The Amit AR2 auto rifle is also a decent option, but it's a world drop, so it's harder to farm, and it's an auto rifle, which I feel are pretty weak in the current sandbox. If you want to run an exotic weapon, you only have 3 options that will apply Scorch. These are the Prometheus Lens Trace Rifle, the Skyburner's Oath Scout Rifle, and the Jotun Fusion Rifle if you have its Catalyst. You can get Jotun's Catalyst as a random drop from playlist activities, which are Vanguard Strikes, Crucible, and Gambit. Your kinetic and power weapons don't matter as much, so run whatever you enjoy running in those slots. By now, you know what to run. I'll now explain how to run it effectively, making use of every part of the build to keep yourself alive when you need to. Firstly, when entering a fight, you can use your barricade or healing grenade to give you restoration instantly. You're also using rally barricade, so you're getting weapon stat bonuses while you sit behind it, which can be helpful at the start of an encounter. You want to single out a couple minor enemies and kill them with your throwing hammer, getting yourself 3 stacks of the Roaring Flames buff. Once you've got your Roaring Flames ×3, you can start to take care of the major enemies. While you're killing majors, use minors as you need them to summon sunspots for yourself and keep your Roaring Flames buff at ×3. You can also use the minors to spawn elemental wells and become charged with light as you're using melee wellmaker. If you go critical, Protective Light will use all of your current stacks of Charge with Light, so it's a really good idea to pay attention to your health, know when you've gone critical, and find some minor enemies to get elemental wells so you can use Protective Light the next time you go critical. Use your super as you see fit. Hammer of Soul is both good at clearing rooms of adds, as well as getting some good damage on bosses. Keep in mind that the Roaring Flames buff also applies to your super. If you're at Roaring Flames ×3, your super will do more damage than if you don't have any stacks of Roaring Flames. Killing adds with your super will also grant you stacks of Roaring Flames, so if you're in the middle of your super and your stacks are getting low, you can kill a minor enemy and re-proc Roaring Flames to keep your super's damage up. This isn't an impenetrable build, and you will be losing health a lot, especially if you're not prioritizing targets well, so it's imperative you keep an eye on your health and your grenade and barricade cooldowns so you know when you can be aggressive or when you have to play it safe. As far as what targets you should prioritize, any enemies that deal high burst damage are on the top of the list. You're less susceptible to sustained damage as long as you continue moving, get hammer hits to grant yourself cure, and use cover effectively, but burst damage will eat right through your restoration. In general content like Hero Nightfalls or normal Seraph Battlegrounds, target prioritization won't be as important as it is in Master or Grandmaster Nightfalls and Legend seasonal content. To sum up the playstyle more concisely, hit and kill enemies with your throwing hammer. And that's the build. Thanks for watching. I'm working on a Warlock build for all of you who are tired of just being the guy who runs Well of Radiance, so look out for that in the next week. Have a good day.